Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, and how are you all today? This is a beautiful day here in Las Vegas. It's still morning time here. East Coast, it's afternoon. Welcome to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. The call-in number is 646-200-4169. And we have Dr. Tim and David both on the line. Welcome. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Judy. Hello, David. Good morning, Tim. How are you? Or good afternoon in your end of the world.
Doing beautifully, thank you.
Awesome. Well, we've got a gorgeous day out here in Las Vegas, and I'm looking forward to an interesting show. Yesterday we started out in the arena of codependence, looking at codependence to interdependence ideas from that particular workshop and some of the tools and some of the ideas that are expressed in that workshop. And so we're going to continue that conversation today with a conversation about the whole bottom line of codependence to interdependence. And so we're delighted that you're here. Jeannie, do you want to give out the number and talk a little bit about what we'll be doing in the coming week in Pahrump?
Sure. I don't have the flyer open on me, but hold on just a second and I'll get it. But yes, the call-in number is 646-200-4169. And the guests are slowly coming into the chat room, but this week we're going to be in Pahrump, Nevada, and the workshops that we're going to do is going to start on Sunday, and we're going to do, of course, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, Sunday afternoon, and that's from 1 until 4:30, and then we're going to be doing, I apologize, I didn't know you were going to ask me to do that, and I don't have the flyer open, so I'm getting there.
Well, I can take care of it. We're
going to be doing Healing Through Relationships on Monday night, and that's from 7 to 9:30. Then we're going to be doing Circle of Life and How to Play It on Tuesday night from 7 to 9:30. And then we're going to be doing Codependence to Interdependence on Wednesday from 7 to 9:30. All of these are free workshops. And we have a more specific address on the website. The actual address is on the flyer, which you can get by going to our website, whyagain.com. That's WHYAGAIN.com. The address itself, Michael and I found out, it's a little bit difficult to find, but on the website itself we have a little more specific instructions. So if you know of anybody that's in the Pahrump, Nevada area, come and see us Sunday through Wednesday. And then Thursday night we'll be doing a support group meeting in Pahrump. And then we'll be coming back here to Vegas and continuing. We had an awesome support group last night with the group at the Unity Church here in Las Vegas and made some major shifts there.
And do we have any questions or thoughts in the chat room, Jeannie?
No, right now there's just a few. There's about 8 people out in the chat room and about 6 people on the phone, and it looks like everybody's just kind of sitting there listening right now.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. Well,
we've already got, I think this must be Terry with his hand up. 417-255. You're on the air.
Hey, Michael,
Terry?
Jeannie, and everybody.
Good morning, Terry. Welcome.
Yeah, the sun has finally come back out here in the Ozarks, and it's a gorgeous day.
Yeah, we have not been in touch with what's happening in the news world, but Jeannie, in getting on to the control panel, opened her MSN and sees the destruction that's happened, and we certainly hold a blessing for those people in, especially the southern states, who are going through so much. And we hold a space of love for them. And I did get a call, and now I understand why, from a woman in Branson this morning who knows us, who wanted to know if they had if we were okay. And so it's some pretty crazy weather stuff happening. So did you have a thought or a comment or a question for us, Terry?
My thought was on a continuation of yesterday's topic, if the space is available for that. I like the way that you present the power person exchange dynamic in relationship, and on the board it really makes quite a graphic impression, where you have the multiple people that end up being in the relationship that you think is just about two people, but it ends up being several people in a relationship. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the power person dynamic. And so I was wondering if you might could open that up, or if you felt like that was something that was too complex to do over the radio, you know?
Well, I had actually considered doing just that today. I was thinking about, and you know, it's a visual presentation that is going to be very difficult for people to follow, I think, verbally without that visual. So I think we'll probably let that go. But if it seems like it flows and comes together, then we'll go ahead and put it forward. But it's a pretty complex piece of information, even to comprehend with the visual. To have the brain cells, and of course it's a piece that comes at the very end of the CoDependence to Interdependence workshop, when we've spent a couple of hours building brain cells about where we're going with it, and I think it would be perhaps too difficult to portray just verbally.
Yeah, I can understand that. It'd be nice to. What I want to say is that it was a powerful presentation, and the impact was very powerful. And as I was considering that and thinking about how that unfolded in the course of the intensive and the workshop, and the images that really drove that home, it was I could see where it would be difficult to get that same feeling and effect. However, I guess we could offer that it's available on the DVDs and at your workshops and intensives to experience that power person exchange dynamic.
True. The CoDependence to Interdependence workshop, for those who may be new to the work, is one of the latest workshops that I created, and or I should say that somebody created and gave to me that came through me, because each time I do it, it still absolutely boggles my mind and opens a new space of understanding, a new space in me as the instrument for expressing it, at how it describes the experience that most people have. And I had thought in terms today. Did you have any other thoughts for us, Terry?
No, that was what I was opening up there. That's good. Yeah.
Okay. For those who may not know Terry is our artist in residence at Heartland and a contractor who is directing the community building projects and alternative building, gardens, design, upgrade, regrade, retrograde, foregrade, the things that are happening at Heartland with 15 buildings and 67 acres. We have lots to design and build and work with, and so we appreciate you, Terry, being in our world.
You're welcome.
1,000%.
Before you get started, Michael, I would just like to offer, we've got probably 8 guests in the chat room, and guests are not, they can't write in the chat room. They can just sit and listen and read. And so I'd like to offer to them, if you need help registering, I'll be glad to help you do that. You can email me. But also I'm putting my email out there in the chat room, and I have my email on. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and email me, and as long as the cyberspace lets it come on through without holding it up somewhere around the stars, then I can present your questions that way too. So my email is Jeanie, Jeanie, @whyagain.com, and I do have my email on, so if you want to email a question in, that way you can participate in the conversation as well.
Right, and the why again is whyagain.com, so the same as our website. And, if you're in the chat room, of course you can ask questions if you're registered through Blog Talk. But if you're not, then you can only listen in the chat room and observe. You can't interact. So if you simply go through the registration process, which is pretty simple and no big deal, you can actually be interacting in the chat room and asking us live questions. So I wanted to start today's show out with a little bit of an explanation of what one of the projects Jeannie's working on right now. She's just finishing up a paper, which this morning she asked me to read from a comparative literature class that she's doing. And she's comparing a poem and a short story by Jean Ryce and Emily Dickinson. And I knew of Ryce and Dickinson, but didn't know much about their lives, and part of her paper was researching their lives. And as I read through her paper, I was sitting on the verge of tears, looking at these two women and the lives that they lived, and the terror and the trauma and the unresolvable pain of their lives, to the point where they simply went into non-communication and isolation as a result of not having any tools or any way to deal with their lives. And I was reminded as I was reading it of Henry David Thoreau's quote, which we start our book out with, the Why Is This Happening to Me Again, where Thoreau says, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And sadly, that's been the status of so much of the world for thousands of years, millions of lives lost in trauma and turmoil that is absolutely not required. And as I say, I read through her paper, kind of did a final proof of it, and was sitting in my own grief, of course, my own stuff, which I've got some work to do around, at why, when there are known solutions to all of the pain of the world, all of the pain that Henry David Thoreau was referring to when he said most men live lives of quiet desperation, there are genius minds and beings who have come and shown us a way out of that. And sadly, by men who want to control other men, they've been turned into teachers of fear and trauma and sacrifice and more suffering, a projection of those minds who don't know how to get out of their own dilemma. And what we're here to do is to support you if you have some of that trauma or turmoil or that quiet desperation that Thoreau wrote about, the pain that Dickinson and Ryce wrote from, the desperation of an unresolvable circumstance or situation in your life. I hope that we can open a space of understanding for you and a space of hope, but more than just a space of hope, but really a space of knowledge, a space of knowing how to walk through, work through, and move to the other side of those mountains. When Yeshua said, if you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed, you'll move mountains, he wasn't necessarily talking about physical hills. He was talking about the mountains that most people have placed in their physiology from their genetics, the rage, the fear, the grief, the pain, the abuse, the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the insanity that has been done in our world in the name of human life. And I'm here to offer that none of that has anything to do with human life. And fortunately, because we are not physical beings, none of that can touch any of us in our being. And when I speak of being, I'm speaking of the experience that each of us has when we hold a newborn, that awesome presence of human life. And if you have a mountain of some form of fear or turmoil on top of your human experience, we are here to support you and invite you to let loose of that mountain, to remove that mountain. It is removable. There is nothing permanent about it. Now, when it's showing up in the mind as a picture, as a reality, as something that has you in the position of a helpless, hopeless victim, I want you to know that you are not helpless, you are not hopeless, you are not a victim, except of what you hold within yourself. And when we hold within ourselves that form of victimhood, that trauma, that pain, then we behave in such a way as to continue that cycle inside of us and outside of us. And what strikes me with the paper that Jeannie's doing, I don't know, maybe you'd even post it on the website, Jeannie, because it's really a powerful read. But you look at these two women who are, world famous writers, authors, poets, Ryce and Dickinson, and yet each of them writing from this place of unresolvable pain, where they basically lock themselves away and live a sort of a living death, which so many are trapped in. And what an issue that reading that paper brought up for me in my own grief was some disgust at the fact that the teachings of a man who said, know the truth and the truth will set you free, and that absolutely knew absolutely how to undo the pain and the trauma and the turmoil to come out the other side and have a life more abundantly, was degraded into a teaching about fear that kept people in their trauma and their grief and their fear, that there was a theological monstrosity called God that was going to burn them forever if they didn't obey some dictate that a preacher offered. And I'll accept everyone's support in my own process, in my own physiology, because I have grief about that. I have some anger about that personally that I know I need to work through to be able to come out clear on the other side of. But just the indignation that the teachings are there, the teachings have been known, the understanding, the tools have been there for so long, and they were degraded to, I don't even know how to say it or what to say about it. But in any event, that if Ryce and Dickinson had the tools, they would have lived lives of aliveness, of joy, of creativity, of delight, of a true human being. If you are personally in the position of Ryce or Dickinson, with the tools that Yeshua taught in the ancient Aramaic 2,000 years ago, I promise you, all of that is removable. All of that can be undone. None of that has any permanence or standing when brought forward into the presence of your human life. And as I was reading Jeannie's paper, what I heard in her analysis and comparison of these two authors, who basically speak of being the living dead, is their call to us, their scream. They put their scream on paper, but so many, I actually had years ago thought about writing a book called Silent Scream, that people who have no way to express the anguish and the trauma that they're in because they feel like they don't deserve support, because they feel like they couldn't get support, because they feel like it's their lot in life to suffer, they deserve it. Whatever their dynamic is, I'm here to say it's all a lie. You do not deserve it. You do not have to put up with it. You do not have to live in it. And what MindShifters Radio is about offering the tools for bringing us out the other side of those dynamics. And it was kind of reinforced for me as I heard both Ryce and Dickinson calling to us to listen to those people in our lives who are in that position, giving that silent scream and responding with the active presence of love, responding with our human capacity to be there and to support each other in the process of healing. And so I am honored and delighted that we get to be with you each day on this radio show. And I thank Carol Guy, who facilitated us being able to set this show up. I thank her for positioning us, helping to position us in a way we could do this, because it's been a challenge in our work as we travel around the globe to leave support behind, because oftentimes support groups falter and don't continue or don't start off at all. But that now we have a way to bring this support an hour a day, 5 days a week to anybody on the planet through the internet. So I thank you, Carol, for facilitating us in that, and it's just a privilege to be with each of you and to offer the support that we can and the knowledge of the tools. And the primary tool that we're talking about is that of forgiveness. If you are stuck as Ryce and Dickinson were, and you hear me speak of the process of forgiveness, you may say to yourself, well, you know, that might work for somebody else, but it wouldn't work for me, so I'm not going to bother. My invitation to you is please, please, please go to www.whyagain.com. Download the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, free. We're delighted for you to take that book and make use of it, read it, put its tools to work in your life. On the right-hand side of every page, there's a link that says Download Worksheets. Please click on the Download Worksheets link. There are two. The first two links are an explanation of the reality management or forgiveness process from the Aramaic. The second link is a copy of the actual worksheet. And we invite you to please take those two items, read through the instructions, put the pen to the paper. And one of the beauties of that worksheet is there are many, many tools built into the worksheet. You don't have to fully comprehend or understand or even complete every step in it. If it's something that you don't understand, skip over it and do that worksheet process. And what you'll see is the mountains in your life that hold you out of a true experience of a human life will begin to move. And you will, instead of playing the patterns of your power person, and I would offer that Henry David Thoreau gave an exact description of every power person that has ever existed in the world. And our definition, we defined yesterday a power person as someone, number one, who had more control over our lives at any point than we had over our lives. And so we felt like our interaction with them was about survival. And usually it's a small child, but not always. It can be an adult. It can be a fully grown adult, man or woman, who's in an abusive relationship with a power person, someone who's not functioning out of love and feels controlled by that power person. So a power person is someone who's not functioning out of their human essence, love, and has more power over our lives than we do. And what happens is, though, the child who experiences a parent who's functioning like that says, well, I'm never going to do that to my kids, ends up usually doing exactly the same thing or an opposite reaction instead of choosing to live a true creative life. And so if we simply replicate the trauma of our power person and pass it on to our children, then we play out the same game, the same dynamics again and again and again. It was so well recognized in the ancient scriptures that this was the dynamic that ran most person. And whether your theological beliefs support this or not, the ancient teachings were about how to change this dynamic. They were not about staying in fear and suffering and self-deprecation. They were about how to live a life of being, how to live a life of love. And so to recognize that and to begin the work. But those scriptures, what they said was, look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. If we never wake up to the choice and to the tools that we have access to, then we'll tend to continue that same pattern, which was also spoken of when they said the sins of the fathers will be passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations. What they were saying was that if you have a power person who is off the mark, and that word sin in Aramaic has nothing to do, this is one of the atrocities committed by the so-called religious, that word sin has nothing to do with who you are or any identity that you should even for a fraction of a second consider living as. You are not that. The word is simply an archery term. And when you fired at the target and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin, you're off the mark. That's all it meant. It had nothing to do with an identity. So when they said the sins of the fathers, it was saying those energies, those rages, those fears, those griefs, those things that never belonged in human experience, played out by a power person, will so impress the child that it will be passed to that child. And the child, if they never acquire the tools and never come to an understanding of Yeshua, will simply play out those dynamics once again of that power person. And sadly, we see in many of the religions that are fear-based instead of love-based, they say nice words about love, as was happening with Yeshua 2,000 years ago. He says, you come near to me with your mouth, but your heart is far from me. If your words are based in fear about anything to do with the teachings of Yeshua, you are in error, my friend. Undo your error. Stop your denial, as James said. Own the truth. The teaching is about the active presence of love. And there was known technology for moving out of those moments of quiet desperation, lovingly passed on by our power person. And we're here to support you in moving through that and coming up the other side. And it's an honor and privilege to be here to do it. So, Jeannie, any questions or thoughts in the chat room or any callers?
No, they're just sitting there listening.
Well, you have me here, Michael.
Jim, give us a thought.
Well, I had a thought about how you mentioned a story yesterday where someone that you had known talked about how his father had raged and beaten him many, many times, but he had never done that to his children.
Yep.
And this was a person who had not ever done any of this kind of work that you're talking about. This is a person who simply decided mentally at a logical level, I will never do to my children what my father did to me. And then you ask the person about whether or not they'd ever felt like raging at their children or if they ever had to fight the impulse. And they said, yes, all the time, many, many times. Well, a key point here for all of us in this work is that denial and suppression is just going to guarantee that we and our heirs get to deal with this issue over and over and over again. So if I had a father who raged at me and I simply make the determination I am never going to hit my children, but every time they do something that runs counter to what I think they should do, I stand tense, tight, fighting the urge to smack them or scream, and I'm radiating the energy of my frustration and anger and pain and confusion. Children pick that up like radar dishes and sponges from their parents. So his children, whether he realized it or not, this gentleman in your story, were getting the effects of their grandfather's rage, even though their father didn't hit them physically, every time it came up in him. And the kinds of tools that you're making available to us here help dismantle that. And one other quick point, I've had somebody recently who was doing worksheets, and they noticed that they've done quite a few worksheets and they don't feel much of a shift. And I say two things to them. I refer them to the story of the hawk and the dove and the snowflake and the weight of the snowflake and how the 3 millionth snowflake finally is enough to break the branch. And I also talk about how if you're simply doing the worksheet process, you are going to benefit because every time you read the worksheet page, you're peeling off another layer of the conditioning from our culture, which says other people are to blame for the content of your mind. Other people are to blame for your feelings. because it keeps reminding you every time you read through the worksheet process how to observe what's really happening and how your mind actually works. That when you focus your thoughts in a negative area, they produce the corresponding negative emotions, and that produces the pain that you want to get rid of.
Powerful input. Thank you, Tim, for that perspective. And to just give a little more detail, because you open an interesting refinement in the work about the actual conversation I had with this gentleman. This man was in probably his late 50s, early 60s. Had been an alcoholic, had joined AA, so had done some spiritual work. And through his AA practice, he said, well, I've done my forgiveness work, and therefore I've never hit my children. I've never verbally, emotionally, physically abused my children as my father did me. And our conversation was about the process of forgiveness. And as we talked about forgiveness, the refinement in the Aramaic, he felt like as he had forgiven his father, I let you off the hook for those terrible things you did to me, Dad, that he was done with forgiveness. And it was a shock to him to realize, when I asked the question, how much time did you spend and do you still spend resisting the urge to beat and abuse? He's like, well, I do it daily. It's all the time. It's part of his daily practice to resist that urge. And so my point to him would be, and to our audience, the point for telling this story, is to recognize that if you've let somebody who did atrocities to you off the hook for what they've done, that's a really nice thing to do. And it can improve the relationship with that person. No question about it. But if you stop there, you stop short of forgiveness. It's kind of like, what the Greeks passed on to us was a Trojan. There was this trickery that took place with the Trojan horse. It was given as a symbol as a gift. And, of course, forgiveness is given to us as a gift. But we were given a Greek idea of forgiveness. Tricked. That if we let others off the hook, that we were finished with the issue. And that's a Trojan horse. To buy that form, that idea as forgiveness is like a Trojan horse. And remember, the Trojan horse went into the city, and inside of it were the seeds of the destruction of the city. If you buy the Greek idea of forgiveness, I let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, you've bought a Trojan horse. And the seeds of your own destruction lie in the use of that tool and thinking that is forgiveness. It's actually to be technically correct, when I let you off the hook for the terrible things you've done, I've pardoned you. It can be a very nice thing to do. It can help to clean up our relationship. But I can pardon you for eternity, and it's never going to change the root of the pain that's inside of me. So here this man stands in his late 50s, early 60s, still carrying full force, full drama, full trauma, the pain from every beating he'd ever had from his father. And having bought the Trojan horse of the Greek idea of forgiveness, I'll let you off the hook, Dad, for all of that, does nothing to change the source of the pain in him. In the ancient Aramaic, you would never in a million years be invited to forgive another. You would never be invited to forgive yourself. You'd never be invited to use that Trojan horse. You would be invited to pardon. Gee, what they did was crazy, insane, nasty, wicked, evil, whatever terms you want to put on it. And it would be a good thing if you were to pardon them. Now, in Aramaic, they would say, let me hand you the tool of forgiveness. Let me show you how to go inside of yourself and remove the power person dynamic of all that abuse so that you don't have to fight that inclination for one more instant in your life. That you be actually finished with that dynamic of abuse. That you no longer are the shadow of the fathers upon the earth. That you no longer live out of the lives of the fathers and, of course, the mothers. That you've actually literally gone inside yourself and removed those things from your genetic structure, from your physiology, from your mind, from your emotions. And you're done with it. That's the core of how you get out of codependent relationship and into interdependent relationship. And it was actually pretty awesome with this man because he had done a significant amount of work in AA. It was pretty awesome to watch him as he opened and went, oh my God, I didn't know what forgiveness was. He actually ended up sponsoring the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. I didn't know what forgiveness was. I thought it was when I let them off the hook. And didn't know that there was even a technology for removing the root of the trauma, for removing that totally and completely from physiology, from genetics. Had done a huge amount of work in the AA system. Didn't know there was a way to remove that stuff. Just thought, well, I guess that's just part of my daily work as I resist, blowing up and exploding and becoming physically and emotionally abusive like my father was. When we wake up to who we are, a whole different game shows up. When we wake up to the actual Aramaic tools of the man named Yeshua, what happens is, in the process of removal, and when Tim talked about that little story about and I don't have it in front of me, but I think I could just about quote it from memory. It's in the back of my book. Tell me the weight of a snowflake, a hawk that asked a wild dove. Nothing, more than nothing, was the answer. Then I must tell you a marvelous story, said the hawk. I sat on the branch of the fir as the snow began to fall, and I watched the snowflakes settling on the twigs of a branch. When 3,749,552 snowflakes had fallen, one more snowflake, weighing nothing more than nothing, landed, and the branch fell off. The dove, being an expert on peace, listened to the story and thought, perhaps only one person's voice is missing for peace to come about in the world. And of course, in the book, we then ask the question, are you willing to be that voice for peace? That you step up to the plate in the space where your power person may have raged, grieved, been emotionally, physically, mentally, verbally abusive. Will you step up to the plate and not only over top of all that noise say, I'll be peaceful, I won't beat my children, but actually go inside yourself and literally face and remove the very inclination to be abusive, the frequency, the energy, the dynamic of that abuse. And as you do the worksheet process, as you forgive, which means as you go inside yourself and remove, address, face, and remove those things, you are freed from them. Now, they asked the master teacher of this process, and I wish I had the brains to have made this process up. I just had the blessing of getting to the Aramaic Yeshua. He's the one who taught it. He's the one who created it, not me. But as you asked that, as he was asked that question, how many of these worksheets do we have to do? Is 7 enough? And he's obviously talking to someone who's done more than one forgiveness process around an issue and said, well, I forgave. I thought I should be finished with that. And they said, well, how many times do we have to do it? Is 7 going to be enough? I don't know. Had this person done 2 or 3 worksheets when he asked that question? He said, how many do I have to do? 7? And what Yeshua replies in Aramaic, a little different than the Greek translation, is what Yeshua replies is, no, 77 times 70. And what that means is you will do kind of like the snowflakes falling on the branch until you hit critical mass. You may do an infinite number of worksheets around any given trauma-based issue until you're finished with that, until you've cleansed and cleaned all of that out of your field. And people say, well, but Michael, that sounds like so much work. I mean, gee, isn't there a softer, easier way? Can't I just take a pill? Can't somebody just magically put their hands on me? Can't somebody just drug me out of this experience? Or hold their hand over me and bless me and do it for me? And you just watch how many people are out there chasing, looking for some way, some magic formula. Oh, I heard about the latest guru in town. They're going to fix me. The latest guru isn't going to fix you. You're going to have to pick up. Yeshua said, take up your cross. You notice he didn't say take up my cross. He said, take up your cross and follow me. He's saying you have to look inside yourself at the work you need to do to clean up that power person dynamic in your life. And you may address that many, many times and the reason for that is because, of course, your power person had a power person who had a power person, who had a power person, who had a power person. It's been going on for a long time. Believe me, your dad, your mom didn't make it up. And if there was a moment in your life and you had children where you were not functioning as the absolute presence of love, guess what? You are your child's power person. And that doesn't make you bad or wrong or evil or anything else. It just means there's work to be done. And we each have our work to do. And when we choose to do our work, it's not a work for wimps. You really, truly have to go in and face yourself and deal with whatever energetic dynamics are in you. Otherwise, you will automatically play out your power person issues. That's just the way it is. And so in the Aramaic, we don't find a theological system that men have turned it into. We don't find a religious system. In the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua, we find a set of tools, a technology with which to face our lives, to work through and be done with the issues in our lives. And as we work through and are done with the issues in our lives, we come out a new creation. We come out perhaps in the same old family circumstance as the active presence of love. And when you come into that family circumstance as the active presence of love, you become the healer for your family. Now, you may have family members who may go into great resistance to you if you come forward as the active presence of love, because the active presence of your love is going to move in them, is going to stir in them those dynamics that you've worked through and they haven't, and they may not like you. That's why Yeshua talked about sometimes the people who are going to be your worst enemies are going to be the people in your own family system, because not having faced and dealt with what you have dealt with, you become the space in which they go into process, and they may not like that. They may resist that. But the gift you give to your genetic structure is that you change the whole family system. You change the dynamic of insanity to one of sanity. You change the dynamic of non-human rage and fear to that of the human presence of love, an actual human life showing up in our bloodlines, in many cases perhaps for the first time in centuries, that the active presence of love has shown up in an adult physiological system, in a family system. And it's such an awesome gift to bring to your genetics and to your family. You are the keeper of your genetics. Tim, David, Jeannie.
Well,
yes.
Go ahead.
I was listening in. Yeah, you know what, Michael, one of the thoughts that came to my mind when you were talking about the fellow that referred to, he's had it under control, that eventually there's going to be an acting out of it. And I remember a seminar that was done by, and I could be mistaken about the two people that were involved. It might have been Johnson and Johnson. And they were a couple, and they were doing role-playing on a stage, and it was kind of like scenes from life and different things, and they had several people that were up on the stage, and they got into the act, and all of a sudden, the husband literally smacked his wife hard across the face and was in total shock when he did it. It was just that he reacted to it based on, and he was just doing a role play with it.
Yeah.
And so those things are still resonating within, and if they aren't, there will come the space, the place for that to emerge. And, I mean, these were very well-known, very well-respected psychologists and psychiatrists that were doing their work, so to speak, and understanding the process of it, yet all of a sudden were in it and instantly reacted to it.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the dynamics, we offer several solutions, what we call the solutions of the non-being mind in the CoDependence workshop. And one of the solutions of the non-being mind is, well, if I could just figure this out. And I would offer that having all the knowledge in your head and figuring it all out has nothing to do and will do nothing toward changing the content of the non-being mind. So if we have figured it all out and we've got all this head knowledge, but we haven't dealt with our own dissociated minds, the situation that comes along and resonates that dissociated mind will bring forward exactly those same dynamics. And one will be in whatever it is that they need to work through. And so what we're here to support is not people knowing about this. And fortunately or unfortunately, well, there are people who will come to the workshop and they'll go, oh, well, this is really neat knowledge. Boy, I like this. This is fun. But we'll never put the pen to the paper. You might remember Yeshua 2,000 years ago addressing the Pharisees. And he said, you put such a load and such a burden on these people, but you will not put one finger to your own work. And that's what he was speaking of, was the mind that says, well, if I just figure it out, then I've got it made. If I just understand, and this hasn't got anything to do with understanding. This has to do with stepping into a life of original creation, not just reproducing the dynamics of the past or trying to figure out the dynamics of the past. Basically,
I beg your pardon.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I was also reminded of the gentleman that came to the intensive that you've used as a way of explaining of what happens along that same line. So this is one of those personal experiences that you've been involved in, and that's the fellow with the Boy Scout story. And that might be appropriate now to share with the audience about what happens, why is this happening to me again? So I think this might be a good place for that.
Well, basically, the Boy Scout story is the story of a man that I often tell in the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, or used to tell often. It's actually, I don't think I actually tell it in the new 2-hour Why Is This Happening to Me Again video, but it is in the old 4-hour Why Is This Happening to Me Again video. And it's a story of a man who became against his own will and choice, was not that kind of a father, became abusive with his children, physically abusive. And it was over them having done some damage. And as much as what you're talking about, David, with that role-playing thing, that here these psychologists are role-playing this out, and all of a sudden this guy goes into actual physical abuse because the circumstance resonated the brain cells that held an abusive power person dynamic. And all of a sudden he's not in control anymore. It's exactly the same dynamic. So this fellow is a good father, an exemplary father, has worked hard at being a good father, and all of a sudden becomes overtly physically abusive with his children. And as he did a worksheet around this issue, what happened was, as he got into the counseling part, the forgiveness part of the process, he dropped back into a memory of being a young boy as a Boy Scout, and where he and some of his friends were at a Boy Scout camp, and they went off hiking and found a building that was abandoned. And they entered the building, and I can remember him saying, it was like somebody threw a switch. He said, we all just went berserk, and we ransacked this place. We just destroyed it. And he said, in the same way that we started, all of a sudden it was like a signal happened and we stopped. And we looked at each other, realized what we had done, left that place, never said another word, never heard another word about it. Left the building ransacked. Now, that's the kind of thing when you're a Boy Scout, it would be logical that you'd live in denial. And he said, I have not thought of that event from the time it happened until this moment in this worksheet. So here he is, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years later, and his boys destroy. And if you watch what this is about, he becomes physically abusive. He beats up on his kids, shocks himself. Why does he do that? Because their behavior of destruction has resonated the dissociated part of his mind that holds his guilt, his shame, his fear at being caught at what he did as a Boy Scout. Boy Scouts don't do those kinds of things. But never having looked at that and resolved that unconscious part of his mind triggered into activity, controls his behavior, and against his own will and choice he becomes abusive of his children. Now, in the ancient Aramaic, they had such an understanding of these dynamics and were able to teach us how to work through them that the control of behavior and decisions from an unconscious level, we would describe what this man did as being controlled from the unconscious level or from the dissociated mind. In the Aramaic, in order to indicate that was what was happening, they had a specific suffix. Well, let me say that 20 times fast. A specific suffix that they added to a word that indicated that whatever that word was controlling perception and behavior. That's how deeply they understood this and the functioning of the mind in the Aramaic. So that suffix is uta, O-O-T-A. So when this man becomes physically abusive of his children, someone who knew what his history and his background was would say he's being controlled by the uta brain cells that come from his experience of ransacking this office at the Boy Scout camp and his guilt and fear around that. That here he is 20, 30 years later being controlled by that. And that's the dynamic in the ancient scriptures when they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. That word heart is a code word for the dissociated or the unconscious mind. They were saying, take care of what you deny and dissociate from, because that's what becomes the thing that ultimately will run your life. And the key is, remember yesterday we said 3 behaviors are possible when the stress is up and the chips are down. The 3 behaviors possible all have to do with levels of stress, and they all come right straight out of the power person dynamic. A person who's in an experience of no stress will do whatever they did automatically to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, they will do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. And when they become ultra-stressed, they will do whatever their power person did that they hated the most. And so here's this man doing this horrendously abusive behavior toward his children in order to keep the brain cells that they've just resonated. Where did his stress come from? Situation shows up, children destroy something. That resonates or fires those dissociated brain cells. When something shows up that fires dissociated brain cells, our stress level goes up. Most people, when that happens, have their stress attached to getting rid of the source of the information that is resonating for them, rather than going inside and dealing with the source of the stress. So in his case, I'm going to beat the hell out of my children so that they don't ever do this again, so that I don't ever have to look at this inside of me. All abuse comes from that dynamic. All so-called discipline, as the way the world teaches it, properly beat up, come from that very dynamic. The word discipline in truth comes from the word disciple. It means properly taught. It does not mean properly beat up. And so when you recognize yourself being run by something outside of you, then you're not living a human life. If you recognize yourself being run by something from inside of you, you're not running a human life. When you are inspired, we're designed, there are three different places our lives can come from, and one is external control, and the person who is always pressured by circumstance into behavior lives a controlled life. The person who works from internal pressure, such as this man that we're talking about with the Boy Scout story, and in that case, he's driven to do a behavior against his own will and choice. When we are run out of the Uta brain cells, we live a driven life. Human beings are not designed for either of those. You remember Yeshua said, I'm in this world but not of this world. Human beings are designed to live from being, from love. We're designed to live an inspired, creative life where we bring new, exquisite, awesome experiences and things from our spiritual beingness into the world and extend and share those things with others. That's what we're designed for. But if we don't ever step into our design, then we're run by the levels of stress based upon our power person dynamics. That's a codependent life. And my thought is, if we have no other questions or comments in the chat room or from David or Terry or Dr. Tim, that we maybe look at the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind. Actually, gee, we're down to about 2 minutes. I guess we're going to have to carry this conversation on Monday because we haven't gotten to the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind.
Michael?
And there are several of them. So we'll hold those over and... Jeannie, if you remind me on Monday, we'll start out with the pseudo-solutions.
We can do it tomorrow, Michael. This is
that's right. Today's only Thursday. I was thinking today was Friday. Okay.
So we can do it tomorrow.
I'm a day ahead of myself.
But I did want to share one thing. We don't have any comments in the chat room or any questions on the switchboard, but we did get an email from someone who we had been working with, and they're normally on listening, and they're not out there today, so I won't give their names, but anyway, they had been working with an issue with their son who was just raging and saying what awful parents they were and he wanted to run away and all this other stuff. And so the parents, the email says, hello to both of you, Michael and Jeannie, just to say that we managed to do our own worksheets around our son today, and he did one too. And then we went on and had a lovely day with him and his brother. Yay.
Hey.
So they were willing to do something different.
That's fabulous, and I think our show's just about over, so please have the best year yet of your eternal life. That's what we're here to support you in.
See you tomorrow.
Bless.